Welcome back to Morning Break. It's time for our Monday Motivation, sponsored by Gates Brain Health. We are joined by the one and only Dr. Randall Gates, plus special guest this week, author Laura Hirsch. She's joining us to talk about a book you wrote kind of based off your own story, your experience, all meant to help others. Talk to me a little bit about your son Trevor and his journey to communicate.
Okay. So when he was 16 years old, he was starting to have grand mal seizures, which is what led me to meet Dr. Gates, and he helped him with his seizures. And so he's been on this journey with us this whole time. So Trevor's now 25. When he was 21, he started playing the piano and learned how to sing. So he was able to hardly speak. He has autism and he has some words, but he's not communicative.
Yeah, I want to go back to the very beginning, because you learned he was going to be almost nonverbal from a very young age. Tell me a little bit about that.
So he did have language when he was born. He had 60 words and then lost them at a year old. I won't go into that too much, but we tried to regain all his health and everything, and the one thing he never regained was his speech. So I mean, that's very common. 40% of kids with autism don't speak. There are 31 million non-speakers worldwide. So this is a huge issue. So after he learned how to play the piano and sing, which is a different part of the brain than speaking, we learned how to do what's called spelling to communicate, which is a new tool for non-speakers to get what's in their brain into their mouth.
And we'll get to that in a second, but Dr. Gates, I want you to address to our viewers how someone is able to sing but not speak.
Well, my discipline's a little different. As a board-certified chiropractic neurologist and chiropractic physician, I almost look at the brain like a personal trainer would. So how do we rehab the brain? And singing comes from the right side of the brain. Speech comes from the left side of the brain. So the classic example would be Mel Tillis. He had a stutter, but he was able to sing well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
so it's a different hemisphere of the brain, singing, but yeah.
But just watching this journey, Laura, you got to this speech to communicate, spelling to communicate, excuse me. Tell me a little bit about what that is all about.
So what spelling to communicate does is it takes speech from a small motor skill, which speaking is a small motor skill, to a large motor skill, which is using the arm to poke out the letters. And it's a progression of training the person with a communication partner, which was me. We first did it over Zoom remote. Some people do it in person with a practitioner. But there's a huge movement here of kids learning how to speak for the first time in their lives. Like Trevor's in his 20s before I finally heard his thoughts and feelings. It was amazing.
Yeah, tell me about that, because you went nearly 20 years with your son, not really able to have a full conversation with him, and now, like you just said, you've been able to hear what he's thinking, and you were quite surprised and how intelligent he really is.
Yes. So what a lot of these children or young adults have is not a cognitive disability, but a motor planning disability. So it's the inability to get what's in the brain to the mouth, apraxia. So the large motor movement gives them a tool to get everything out what they need to. So it's a process. It took us, he became an open speller pretty quickly, but we've been doing it for 3 years now, and we don't do the lessons anymore. Like, that's how you start out. First spelling, then known questions, then prior knowledge questions, and then you get to open eventually.
Very quickly, that first feeling you had when you had this communication with your son, what was that?
Oh my God. It was like meeting him for the first time in his life. Like, I was surprised every time we spelled. Like, I would call my friend and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got a Trevor story for you.
Oh, yeah.
Every single time, because she's like, you gotta stop being surprised. And I said, it's just, I like met a new person. Like, he's been in there this whole time and I didn't know.
So then you were able to take that and you wrote a book with your son.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about this.
Well, he spelled to me, it was his idea, that he wanted to write a book with me about his life to inspire others. I was an author prior to this book, and so he knew that. And he picked the title, More Than Meets the Eye, and he just wants to help others, but it's chronicling everything that happened in the last 5 years of his life.
And Dr. Gates, you saw a lot of this journey. What was that like very quickly?
Incredibly moving. Like Laura said, I always knew he was in there when I was working with him, but I could tell he wasn't able to get it out. And I find it so interesting. In neurology, they would call this aphasia, but as Laura said they're calling it apraxia. It's a motor planning issue. And I think it's a great way for us to now start to think about that with autistic patients.
Well, I'm getting yelled at for time, but I want people to know where you can get your book, because I know there are more people out there and your story can help.
Yes, so it is available on Amazon and Kindle. It's also on my website, laurahirschauthor.com, which also shows videos of him spelling and singing, even spelling to Dr. Gates in the office for the first time. But yeah, those are the main ways. And there's a movie out called Spellers. It's free on YouTube that they can watch about other people's journeys doing the same thing.
Really wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, because I know that it's going to make a huge impact on a lot of people out there. So, Dr. Gates, Laura, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much. Yep.
We'll be right back.